Welcome to Reimagining Soviet Georgia. Today we have historian Nikos Marantzidis. Nikos, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
I'm professor of political science and modern political history in the University of Macedonia in Thessaloniki, Greece. My expertise is particularly oriented on European communism and Greek communism. My recent research are related to different phases of the history of Greek communism. And my last book, Under Stalin's Shadow, A Global History of Greek Communism, was an effort to see the history of the Greek Communist Party, the KKE, not from a domestic aspect, if you like, not from what happened inside the Greek frontiers during 100 years of the presence of the Communist Party in Greece, but from another perspective, a global perspective, see the Greek communism through the eyes of a global phenomenon which used to be international communism.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Let's start discussing your book and some of the things you have found. Maybe you can start from the beginning. Why did you decide to look at it from more of an internationalist communist perspective? And how do you place the Greek communists within that?
As I've said before, I've studied Greek communism since 30 years ago. So I think that I have a good knowledge of the history of Greek communism and also the history of different communist parties. I did my studies, my PhD in France, in Paris, so I have a quite good knowledge of the history of the French Communist Party, the PCF, and other communist parties. And I figure out that communism was not a simple story, a story of parallel communist parties that work inside different nation states. The communist parties was not this kind of parties. I mean, the particularity of communism was exactly this. It's global perspective, its global ambition to change the world, and this ambition, this strategy, this ideology was based in a very clear concept of internationalism, of a way of thinking that overcome that passed through the different borders. So, having this in mind, I was thinking that the problem discussing Greek communism, I thought it was a kind of parochialism. I mean, a lot of books, a lot of papers, a lot of articles concerning the different aspect of Greek communism. that in general was very nice, very good works, but I was feeling that there was a problem, and the problem was that Greek communism had also and was based particularly on this international dimension, this global dimension, through different networks. For example, the network of the Third International, the Communist International, the Comintern, as we say, or the networks of the Balkan Communist Organization, or other kind of international organizations related to Comintern, or later to Cominform, or to the Soviet Union, or to different global communist networks. So I was thinking that what I need to do is to concentrate my work, to concentrate my effort, trying to see what exactly was this kind of connection between the Greek communists and the international, the central, if you like, the center, not only Moscow, but all the international organizations related to communism. Of course, this was a very complicated story, because the difficulty is to deal with the archives, because there is huge amount of different kind of materials. And of course, Greek communism has had a particularity vis-a-vis other kind of communist parties, and this particularity is that after 1949, when the party lost the civil war, the headquarters of the Communist Party of Greece moved from Athens to Bucharest. And during the civil war, 46 to 49, the headquarters were at that time in Belgrade. So you see, there is a lot of travels from Athens to Belgrade, from Belgrade to Bucharest, and later on, after 68, there is another move from Bucharest to Budapest. But this is a different story beyond the book interest. So my problem was that all this very complicated history created a lot of historical materials, documents in different places, in different capitals, different countries, etc., etc. So I needed a lot of time. This book is the product of 20 years, almost 20 years research and study on history of Greek communists. I decided to stop in 1956. In reality, 1953, in the moment of the death of Stalin, because after 20th Congress, excuse me, of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev period, etc., etc., there is another period also for the Greek Communist Party that it was impossible to write, at least for the moment. I thought that beginning from the very beginning of the Communist Party's life in 1918 and stopping in 1956, I covered a very characteristic period of Greek communism from different perspective, if you like.
So, Nikos, that's all very interesting, and I really I really enjoyed in your book that you give this international context for Greek communism, but you do it in a way where you say, okay, Bulgaria is as important and the Balkan context is as important as the Soviet, the relationship with the Soviet Union. And you kind of like say there's not, even in the international context, there's different layers and spheres of influence in the development of Greek communism. But maybe for our listeners, a good place to take the discussion is, can you give us a outline of how was the Greek Communist Party founded?
The Greek Communist Party was founded typically with this name in 1924. But in reality, the party was founded as Socialist Labour Party of Greece, SEKE, in 1918. In 1918, it is a very critical moment, internationally speaking, not only for Greece. Internationally, we are almost a year after the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. So what happened in Russia is very determinant for the psychology, the mentality, the identity of Greek socialists as everywhere in Europe vis-a-vis European socialism. So Greek socialists at this moment in 1918, when they created their party, the SEKE party, they have two alternatives. The one was to be close to the old Second International, the Socialist International, being reformist and belonging to this reformist tradition. And the other alternative was to be revolutionary, to decide to follow the Bolshevik path. So the party, in reality, for some years, the elites of the party lived in a situation, in a confusion. There were a kind of serious internal conflict and debate about belonging to the Communist International or not belonging. And this internal conflict created a lot of crisis. I can say it was a continuous crisis until 1924. And 1924 is a critical moment for two reasons. The one reason is because the party finally decided to change its name from socialist to communist. This was not a typical change. It was not something of minor importance. It was very, very critical, very, very important, because it was the change of the name was one of the 21 conditions of the Communist International to belong to the organization based in Moscow. Change your name because your name signifies the political and ideological identity, and also the connections to the Comintern. So this was the one thing. The second thing, because the change of the name happened in relation to a second very, very important, probably the most important issue that the Greek communists met during this period of the interwar period, and it was the Macedonian question. The Macedonian question was the hottest question in the Balkans for decades. So the Greek communists were obliged to adopt the decision that the Comintern and the Balkan Communist Federation adopted a few years ago about the independence of Macedonia. This was a very critical and difficult issue, you can understand, because for the Greek communists, accepting the independence of Macedonia meant at the same time that a part of the Greek territories in the north of the country should abandon for another country. So this created a lot of problems to them. They were denounced as anti-national, as pro-Bulgarian, pro-Macedonian, pro-Bolshevik, etc., etc. So for many years, the decision about the independence of Macedonia was, I can say, a thorn for the country, because it was very difficult for them to deal with this question, not only outside the party, I mean vis-a-vis the authorities, the Greek society, but even inside the party, because there were a lot of militants, of members of the party, of leaders who were not in favor of this decision. But it was obligatory if they wanted to be member of the Comintern, if they wanted to be communist, if they wanted to belong to this international community that were called communism. So they decided in 1924 these two very, very important, I can say, no other decision for the Communist Party, but speaking about the Macedonian question, was so important, so difficult to take it, to adopt it. That was this decision about the independence of Macedonia. They decided it. They adopted these two decisions, and we can say that from 1924, officially from December 1924, we have a communist party in Greece, and this is, from the first minute, this is a Stalinist party. I mean, a party during this time, Stalin dominated the Bolsheviks, and there is a clear change in the line of the Bolshevik party towards a number of issues. So the Communist Party of Greece decided not only to become a communist party, but at the same time to become a Stalinist party, a party that followed the line of Joseph Stalin.
And Nikos, you talk also in your book not only about how the party itself had these international connections and was very much oriented towards trying to integrate into this international communist movement by adopting positions such as on the Macedonia question. But there's another part, at least in the beginning of your book, where you talk about how, given the diasporic nature of Greeks, that Greeks are living in a lot of territories that during this period will start to, turn into new nations. Greeks are leaving for various reasons, especially in what will become Turkey. But there's also Greeks who are living in territories that will become the Soviet Union after 1921. And part of your story is talking about how Greeks from outside of what is now mainland Greece will come back and play a role in the founding of the Greek Communist Party. So that is a secondary and parallel kind of international dimension to your story. So what were the role, or what was the role of the Soviet Greeks, those Greeks from the Soviet Union? And of course, there are many Greeks that are living in the South Caucasus, but not only, right, in some other places. So what is the role that they play in the founding of the Communist Party of Greece?
You're right, Brian. what is very important in my book, and it is an important aspect of this Greek communism, is its transnational dimension of its character. The transnational dimension of Greek communism is related also to the global phenomenon, the global dimension of communism. I mean, how different communities, diasporic communities, how the Greek diaspora in different countries played a very important role in the mechanism of propaganda, the activist involvement of these communities in communism. So what is very important here, and it is interesting that during this interwar period, during this first years or early years of Greek communism, the Bolsheviks, the Soviet state, decided to use the Greek communities who were living for decades or centuries in South Russia, in the north part of the Black Sea region, in Georgia now, Ukraine, and Russia. In our days. In those days, it was Russian Empire, and later on Russia. And during the Soviet states, of course, we have the People's Republic of Georgia, People's Republic of Ukraine, later Socialist Republic. Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine, Russia, and Georgia. So in this region, was living an important Greek community for decades, and some of them were members of the the Bolshevik Party, belonged to the communist movement in Russia. So it was there was an effort by the Bolsheviks to send them in Greece and to create a first group of missionaries who were able to link the two countries, the two parties, the Bolsheviks and the Bolshevik Party and the Greek Communist Party, and the two organizations, I mean the Greek Party and the Comintern. The idea was ambitious, and in the beginning, they thought that they solved the problem of the connections between the two parties, because there was an issue that was important. In the difference of the other Balkan states, I mean Bulgaria, Serbia, Yugoslavia, Romania, etc., Greek didn't have an important, I can say, intelligentsia or people who knew Russian language and used to have relations with Soviet Union. So the problem for Greek socialists who became communists in the next years, the problem was that they were completely unable to contact and communicate with the Russians because they didn't know Russian language. Okay, they knew French, English, German, but not Russian. So the idea to involve the Greek community of Russia, Soviet Union, in the everyday life of the Communist Party of Greece was based in this idea that it was very important for the creation of different connections between the two organizations to have people who could create this kind of bridge between the two different cultures, the two different organizations. The problem was that those people who used to live in Russia, they didn't know Greek, and they didn't know the Greek culture. They were Greeks, but in reality, they didn't have any kind of connections for centuries or many, many years at least with the Greek state. So this created a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of a confusion. And in the end, they decided the opposite way. I mean, they said, okay, it's probably not a good idea to send Greeks from Russia to Greece. It's better to send Greeks from Greece to Russia. And an important number, hundreds of members, cadres of the Greek Communist Party were sent from Greece to Moscow. They attended the party schools there. They entered and they learned Russian. They entered in the I can say they started understood the Russian and the Bolshevik culture. And the idea was very simple and very practical, to return back to Greece after their studies, their past studies in Moscow, and to assume the leadership of the Greek party. It was not so bad as an idea. You know, it's the same in Greece. You have a lot of people who study in the US, in the Ivy League universities. They come back and they belong to the elite of the country, having also a certification of knowledge and of technocracy. And it was that, if you like, you can say that we are in the modern world, and the idea to have a certification that I learned things from the best, and the best in the communist world were in Moscow and the party school there. So it was a very logic and very practical idea, and also this idea could assure that those people had the authority when they come back to be accepted by the members and the other cadres, the activists of the party. They were accepted as the real revolutionaries, the real Bolsheviks, the people who had the authority, the certificate, as a revolutionaries, you like.
So what were some of the misunderstandings? Do you have any examples?
Yeah, of course. For example, the problem with not knowing Greek language. So some of these Greek Russians, Bolsheviks, they came believing that, okay, they were the responsible, the people that were given the right to the leadership of the Greek party, but having not the knowledge of the Greek language, the other members of the party, they didn't accept them as true leaders. So many times we can see different kind of stories that the base of these misunderstandings was that the one didn't understand what exactly the other said. So there are a lot of little stories of these kinds, and there were other stories that I can, how can I label them? Revolutionary pride, if you like. I mean, some of the activists of the Greek party who were really activist in Greece, but they didn't came from Russia. They couldn't accept that they were a kind of secondary kind of members. I mean, they felt that the Russians had a privilege or some privileges in the party, and this was not acceptable by them. This kind of stories, there were a lot, and many of them they thought, and they wrote in the memoirs, for example, that the Russians who came to our party, they have a very low ideological political level. They didn't so well they thought they were, etc., etc. In realities, I can say that it was two different, in some cases, two different wars. The war of Greek communism developing Greece among Greeks of Greece or other diasporic communities like Asia Minor Greeks, and the world of this small community of Greek Russian Bolsheviks who came in Greece after 1924 to organize and leading the party. So I can say that the problem was that two different cultures, two different words, two different languages, of course. So a gap between them that was expressed and showed in different aspects of the function of the party. There are two different groups that in the beginning played a critical role in the development of the party. The one is the Greek refugees from Asia Minor, from Turkey, that came in the country in 1924, 1923, 1924, after the Asia Minor catastrophe, after the military defeat of Greece, of the Greek army in Asia Minor. So almost 1,500,000 Greeks in a very tragic situation. It was a catastrophe, a situation of absolute disaster for this community. So almost 1,500,000 Greeks came in Greece, and those people, from those population, an important number of the communist membership in the 20s and the 30s was developed and was born. And this was related absolutely with the fact that this population of Greek refugees, they felt the disaster of the Greek decision to send troops to Asia Minor and to continue the war against Turkey. So for them, all this situation was not only simply a refugee situation. I mean a move from one country to another, but it was a downward social mobility that destroyed their life, destroyed their perspective, destroyed their families for many, many years. Many of these people, many of these human beings were sent to the tobacco industries. They worked to the tobacco industries in northern Greece, and inside this new world, the world of the worker in tobacco industry, many of them met communism and were transformed into communist members. And the other community, which also played a critical role in the beginning of the Communist Party, the early years of the Communist Party, was the Jewish community of Thessaloniki. This community was the majority of the city, and the Communist Party was for many years the most important party inside this community. And in general, these two communities created a very, very, very negative feelings inside the Greek state, because the Greek state was felt that was threatened by two foreigners, if you like, Jews and refugees. The Greek state, they called them many times as Turkish-born people.
Would you say, Nikos, would you say that then the fact that there was such an important role of Jews and these refugees from Anatolia who were constituting a base of the Greek Communist Party did that and then was in tension with the very nationalist Greek state, did that play a role in shaping how the Communist Party of Greece approached questions of nationalism?
Oh, good question. No, because the Greek Communist Party, even before the arrival of refugees from Anatolia, denounced First World War and denounced the military, as the party called, opportunism of the Greek state and imperialism sent in deciding to send troops in Anatolia. So the party, before the arrival of refugees and before also the massive transformation of refugees and Jewish people to communist members, the party had a clear anti-nationalist stance and was opposed to the different nationalist policies of the Greek state. But it was I can say the inverse, the opposite. I mean, because the party had this crystal clear stance against nationalism, that minorities felt that the party could be their defense in the service of their defense. I mean, their defender.
So how did World War II and then Stalin sort of shape all of this? Like, how did it shape the party afterwards?
World War II and the years that follow changed radically the position of the party inside Greek society and in general in the political landscape of the country. Why? The answer is easy, is because of the resistance. The resistance movement, and the pioneer role of the communists in the Greek resistance changed radically their place in the political scene. It is important to say that during the interwar period, the Greek party, the Greek Communist Party, was a small party, a minor party for seen the comparatively to other communist parties like the Bulgarian one or the Serbian one or the Hungarian and of course other parties, even the French one. So the Greek party was a small party. Only in the second half of the 30s, the party could play some role, and I can say in Greek political scene, but even then very limited role. But after the German occupation in Greece and the development, the rise of the Greek resistance and the leading role of the Communist Party in the Greek resistance, situation changed. So immediately after the liberation, we could say, and we have surveys that showed it, that the Greek party was probably the most important, electorally speaking, but also in regard to its membership, the most important single party in Greece. Different surveys, different scholars show that probably in 1945, 1946, the party had an electorate that turned around 30% of the voters, which was huge and was more important if we consider that this party was in a situation of illegality from 1936 to 1941, the years of Metaxas dictatorship. And after 41 until 44, it was the years of the German occupation. So the party for almost 10 years, from the mid-30s to the mid-40s, was illegal. And all the structures of the party, the members, etc., were threatened by different kind of authorities, the dictatorship, and then the collaborators of the Germans, etc. So immediately after the liberation, we saw a completely different situation. We have then a new protagonist in the political scene, and this is the Greek Communist Party. But at the same time, it was the breakup of the Civil War that will lead to new developments, to a new, completely different new political context. And 3 years after the end of this Civil War, which began in 1946 and ended in the end of 1949, the Communist Party was again illegal, but this time with thousands of its members and its cadres in outside Greece, in different countries of Eastern Europe. And from this moment, from 1949, from the end of the Civil War, there is a new chapter in the history of the Greek Communist Party, a new chapter of the international, the global history of the Greek Communist Party, because now almost 100,000 Greek communists were living in a huge area, which a Greek historian called it refugee land, socialist refugee land, the Balkans, Central and Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, Tashkent, etc. And all this new refugee land will constitute the region, the place that this new chapter in the life of Greek communism will begin.
On the one hand, your book is called Under Stalin's Shadow, and Stalin and Stalinism play what seemed to be, from reading your book, a unique role in the Greek Communist Party that kind of separates it from other parties in the region over the course of its history. So the first part of my question is, can you explain this role and significance of Stalin and Stalinism in the Greek Communist Party? And then the second part of my question is, it's very well known that during the Greek Civil War, the Greek Communist Party had really wanted the Soviet Union to intervene on their behalf. And very, very famously, of course, the Soviet Union was not able to make good on that. They didn't intervene on behalf of the Greek Communist Party. And then, of course, the Greek Communist Party lost, as you've already gone over. And so I'm also curious, how did the Soviet Union's non-intervention shape the view of Stalin or Stalinism, or did it? How did the Greek Communist Party sort of react politically to the non-intervention of the USSR, and how will that shape the trajectory of the party?
Good question. Good question, and very, very interesting question, because I start with the second question, and I go next to the first, because this question of the role of the Soviet Union shaped not only the debate inside the Communist Party, but also shaped the debate in general in Greece after the end of the Civil War, and created a lot of historiographical, but also public histories and propaganda debates, we could say, during the years that followed the Civil War. I will be more concrete on this. What was the general idea? The general idea after the Civil War, coming from the Greek state, the nationalist Greek state, the right wing, the states of the winners, as we say in Greece, the winners, which was the nationalists, they said the communists, the Greek communists, decide the revolution, decide to the civil war, to enter in civil war, because they followed Stalin's instructions. This was completely fake news, as you know. We say today it was completely wrong, because not only never Stalin ordered the Greek communists to begin civil war, but it was exactly the opposite. In two different moments, in 1944 and in 1946. In 1944, Stalin consulted the Greek communists not to start a civil war, and on the contrary, to participate in a national governance, in a national government with the other political forces, and try to they consulted the Greeks to find a compromise with the bourgeois parties, as they call it. The second moment, it was in 1946, on January, a mission of the Communist Party was sent from Athens to Moscow. They didn't meet Stalin. They failed to see Stalin, but they met other important leaders of the Soviet Party, and the Soviets were clear. They consulted the Greeks to participate in the elections predicted for 1946 March. So they consulted them to participate to the election, not to abstain, and not to enter in a violent conflict against their enemies. The Greeks, in reality, they didn't follow the Stalin's consultants in 1944 and 1946. So this was a paradox situation for a communist party, a paradox situation, because in general, we know that parties like the Greek one, toward Stalin and toward the Bolsheviks, they were in a weak position. I mean, when Stalin ordered something, it was the logic was to think that the party would follow the lines the consults of Stalin's. The problem is that in 1944 and 1946 in the Balkans, there is another factor which is too complicated to analyze in a deep way now, but the name is important to be said, and this is Tito, the Yugoslav leader. And Tito used to have a quite, I can say, independent role in this conflict. Tito pushed the Greek communists to follow his line, to be more active in the claim of a socialist change in Greece, a revolution in Greece. And according to the materials, the documents we have, he promised different kind of help of aid to the Greeks, military, politically, and other kind, financially probably, to his Greek comrades. So the situation was complicated during this year. And the Greeks decided to play the card of the revolution. They loses, and the question later was what happened with the Soviets? Why the Soviets didn't help the Greek party? Why the Soviets didn't decide to be involved in the situation in the Balkans, and particularly in Greece? So the idea that the Communist Party decided to the revolution following Stalin's consultants was completely wrong. The second question, why Stalin didn't help the Greeks, divided the party into different blocks. The one block said that Soviets betrayed us. Soviets and Stalin betrayed the Greek revolution, as they betrayed the Soviets and Stalin personally, the Spanish Revolution during the Spanish Civil War. The second majoritarian, I can say, trend inside communists said that the party was wrong, Stalin was right. We didn't, it was a wrong decision to decide to escalate violently the conflict between the communist powers and the communist guerrilla and the Greek nationalist army, and we should play the political cards. We should be participating in the elections, the parliamentary elections of 1946, and we should continue to play the role of I can say the peaceful player, the peaceful factor in Greek politics. So Stalin, according to this this line, to this trend, was considered as someone who was right and was cleverly consulted the Communist Party, but the leaders of the Communist Party were were people that ignored the international balance of power. They underestimated the enemy's power and the role of the United States, and they overestimated their capacities to win. This is the second question. The first question concerning how was this Stalinist shaping? I can say two words. The one is the leader, and the leader is Nikos Zachariadis. And Nikos Zachariadis is the, as the French say, par excellence, product of the Stalinist party. I mean, Nikos Zachariadis was someone who almost never was living in Greece. He was born outside Greece and was raised in Istanbul. And from Istanbul, he moved in Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution, becoming a member of the Komsomol and later the Bolshevik Party. And he entered, he was living for many years in Russia, and he was returning Greece in 1931 when the Communist International decided to change the leadership of the party and put Nikos Zachariadis in the place of the General Secretary of, in the position of the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Greece. So Nikos Zachariadis was, I can say, a very characteristic type of leader of the Stalinist period. He adored Stalin. He thought that Stalin was the supreme leader of all the communist world. She believed that the Stalin style of leadership was the only style that could permit the rise of the party and the success of the communist revolution in the future. Nikos Zachariadis was also, Nikos Zachariadis was followed by what we could call Russification in the structures of the Communist Party. And Russification in reality means that after the 30s and until at least the 50s, 60s, many of the decisions of the Communist Party of Greece were completely, I can say, in relation to what happened in the USSR and what happened to the Communist Party of Soviet Union. So Zachariadis, since 1931, is the style of the leader who try to completely follow, I can say, it's almost a copy-paste of the Stalinist model of leadership in the structures, of course, of the Greek party.
So it's very clear, this relationship that the Greek Communist Party had to the Soviet Union. And you kind of in passing mentioned that there's also this Balkan context. So I just want to focus for 1 second on the Balkan context. You've got Sofia, Bulgaria, right? You've got Belgrade in Yugoslavia, and you even have, of course, Albania eventually. So maybe for our listeners, could you just kind of give an outline of how did the various kind of interpretations and orientations of the Balkan communist parties, these various centers of power, Tirana, Belgrade, and Sofia, how did this this Balkan context shape the Greek Communist Party? And obviously there were different ideological orientations that would go through shifts and changes. Some of these Balkan parties would be aligned with Moscow and then splits with Moscow, right? And very famously, the Albanian Communist Party would become like a Maoist party eventually. So how did this Balkan context specifically, either in relation to or even in sometimes opposition to the Soviet Union, shape the trajectory of the Greek Communist Party?
I can divide this Balkan dimension upon Greek communism in two different periods. The one period is the interwar period, and the interwar period, the Balkan dimension is shaped by this idea of this very, very old idea of Balkan Federation. The idea is originated in the 18th century in reality. It was a Greek thinker of 18th century, Rigas Fereos, Rigas Valenstilis, who conceived this idea of Balkan Federation, which was the alternative to two different poles, the third way, if you like. The one is the Ottoman Empire, and the other is the nationalism. So the alternative to nationalism and the empire, the third way, was the idea of Balkan Federation. And the idea was quite clear, we can say theoretically at least. It was that the Balkan peoples could unite it in the base of equality, of acceptance of different cultures, different languages, and in a democratic way. So this idea of Balkan Confederation shaped, I can say dramatically, the beginning of Greek communism, and not only Greek communism, but in general Balkan communism in the 20s. So this idea permitted two strategies, if you like. The one is to oppose a project, a communist project against nationalism. This was one thing. So communists didn't want to defend the nationalist projects that were created in the Balkans after, since better the Balkan Wars, since the early 20th century or the late 19th century. So they didn't want to help these nationalist projects. On the contrary, they wanted to present an alternative, and the alternative was the Balkan Federation. The second was that this alternative, the Balkan Federation, permitted to create situations of revolution inside the different Balkan states, because Balkan Federation in reality was from every side you want, from every aspect you want, it was a threat to the national states, because Balkan Confederation presented a clear alternative project to the different nation states in the Balkans. And from this aspect, we can understand the Macedonian question. The Macedonian question was thought as an instrument that could create the revolution in the Balkans, so permitted and promoted revolution in East, in the South European continent. And not only this, but also created a different narrative in relation to the future of the Balkan nations. The problem, or the difficulty better, with this idea was that it was incompatible with the contemporary strategies and histories of the different Balkan states. I mean, some Balkan states, Greece, Yugoslavia, belong to the Entente Alliance, and Bulgaria on the other side, and Turkey belonged to, during First World War, to German, Austrian, Central Powers Alliance. So the problem for the communists in the Balkans during the interwar period was that they were obliged to live with contradictory realities in their countries. And the second problem concerning to this was that inside the Balkan communist movement, Bulgarians had a special role, let's say, and had a special place. And this special place of the Bulgarian Communist Party was related to two different things. The first, the very close relations with the Russians. A lot of important Bulgarian communists were connected and had relations with the Bolsheviks. And of course, this created a kind of, how can I say, a community of feelings, if you like. And the second reason was that the Bulgarian Communist Party was indeed the most important, the bigger party, the most influential communist party in the Balkans. So for these two reasons, the Bulgarians had a very special role in the Balkan Communist Federation and a very special role in general inside Balkan communism. And the most characteristic figure that show us this, it was Dimitrov. Dimitrov, one of the many second hands of Stalin, the leader of the Communist International, later on the leader of the Bulgarian Socialist, Bulgaria is a socialist country, president of Bulgaria in this period. So Dimitrov was the leading figure of Balkan communism. And this situation, in general, was not always accepted by the other parties, particularly by the Yugoslavs and the Greeks. After the war, we have a second and different, the Second World War, I mean, we have a completely different situation in the Balkans because except Greece and, of course, Turkey, all the other countries became communist countries, belonged to the socialist or the communist war. So this situation for the Greeks had a very dramatic impact because now, I mean, after the war, these parties were not only parties, but they were parties that led states. So the Greek Communist Party was in a position of inferiority towards these parties. And we should see two different moments to understand this. The first is that the Greece wanted the help of Yugoslavia and Bulgaria during the Greek Civil War. So the party was obliged to ask for any kind of aid toward the Yugoslav and the Bulgarians and the Albanians and the Romanians too. And second, when the party lost the civil war after 1949, the party moved in Bucharest, so the headquarters of the party were in Romania, and the party was obliged to live in a situation of refugee, I can say, not only individually, but also collectively. The Communist Party of Greece was a refugee party in Romania and in the other Balkan countries, and also Eastern countries and Soviet Union. So from this period, and then the party was obliged to, the balance of power changed dramatically, and the party was in a situation of inferiority to the different Balkan parties and Balkan countries.
When I was in Greece, when I spent some time with KOI, which is this communist organization of Greece that broke with KKE, there's sort of criticism that's become sort of ossified, World War II glorified heroes. That's it. They have conservative politics otherwise. I also went to Crete, and this was this like incredible restaurant that was owned by KKE with like all the photos, everything. Food was insanely delicious, and guy was incredible. And I personally like loved going to like all the KKE places, and then seeing all the World War II monuments and history, and that was like something that was incredible for me. It seems like I'm interested in the fact that because there's such a strong tradition of World War II, and it seems like maybe younger people who are very disconnected from these historical moments, how do they view KKE, and how what is it like? What is the fate of the Greek communists in general now?
Very interesting question. The question of the memory of all this, not only of the 40s, but in general of the history of the KKE from the very beginning until the end of the Civil War. If I can put a title, I can say divisive histories, divisive memories. I mean, even inside, and this is one of the most interesting aspects of the history of Greek communism, is the divisions that exist inside its movements, inside its tradition, inside the communist legacy. And what is important to say is that, very quickly, because all this is very complicated, the Greek Communist Party suffered from two different scissions and very, very important internal conflict, 1946 and 1968. And the one is the end of Stalinism, if you like, and the rise of a new era related to Khrushchev in the Soviet Union. And 1968 is related to the invasion of the Soviets in Czechoslovakia, the Prague Spring, and everything what was happened there during this moment. So a part of Greek communists separated from the Orthodox bloc, if you like, and followed the Euro-communist tradition. And these two conflictual traditions, two different traditions inside Greek communists, created two different parties in our days related to two different memories. And these two parties are the KKE, of course, and Syriza. And Syriza was, from one side, the success story of the radical left in Greece, because they won the elections of 2015. Of course, the party lost the next elections in 2019, and then in 23 and 24, and now the party suffers from a very harsh division inside it. And the other party is the KKE, which remains, so we could say, loyal to this Stalinist tradition. I mean, the Communist Party of Greece is the party that tries to find its legitimacy in the Stalinist period and the revolutionary moment of its history, most of all in the Civil War. And this is one of the differences between Syriza and KKE memories. Memories of KKE are closely related to the Civil War. The memories of Syriza are more related to the resistance period and the fight against occupation forces, against fascism. It's clear that from one side we can say that all this how can I say this memory war between the two different aspects of Greek communism, the Communist Party and the post-Communist Party of Syriza, because Syriza originated from communist parties and communist members who decided to leave the party and create other parties. So this conflict, this memorial conflict between the two parties, it expresses in one way the two different aspects, not only of Greek communism, but in general radical politics in Greece. The one that was related to the Soviet Union, that was close or identified to the Soviet Union, and the other that took distances from Soviet Union and searched, I can say, trying to find in other legacies, in other traditions, the legitimacy it wanted.
It seems like that's a real problem everywhere in Europe, that most of the socialists that survived and exist are anti-communist, anti-Soviet Union, and they want to distance themselves from the Soviet Union completely. And they want to draw upon other traditions. And they're mostly, I mean, I see most of them just being a more left version of liberals, you know. That's
you're right that what we have in Europe, it's two different traditions, the socialist one and the communist. The difference in the Greek case, speaking about Syriza and the KKE, is that they came from the same source, from the same tradition, the communist one. And in reality, we cannot say that Syriza is an anti-communist movement or party. On the contrary, but they were not identified with the Stalinist period, if you like. I can say that we could find two different legacies in what we see today. The one is the Stalinist legacy, and the other is, I don't know, the perestroika, and I could say legacy, or the Khrushchev legacy. It depends. It's a bit big discussion and very complicated also.
I don't want to complicate this further, but one little question, if if you will allow. where do the Maoists, sort of this Maoism comes into Greece? If you know,
Yeah, Maoism came to Greece from the crisis and the split of 1956. In 1956, what we have the how we call it in English, destitution is this good term? Yeah, this the secretary of Nikos Zachariadis. So they fired, the Soviets fired Zachariadis, yeah, the Secretary General, and the follower of Zachariadis were obliged to leave the party. So this split of 1956 is at the beginning of the Maoist movement in Greece, because many of these activists try to find in the Maoist model and the continuation of their project. And the second source of Maoism in Greece is the student movement in the early 70s, related mostly with the resistance against the military dictatorship in Greece, junta that lasted from 1967 to 1974. During the last years of the dictatorship, an important, we have seen the rise of an important student movement, and many of these activists against the military dictatorship, they belonged then or later to the Maoist movement. And this movement, what was quite important inside in the student movement, but never had a very large impact, a very large audience in Greek society. My book tried to observe and to study a fascinating history, which is the history of Greek communism since the beginning until the 50s. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to study what happened later after the 50s and until our days. And it was good if I could promise that I prepare another book for this period. I don't do this for the time being, but I'm sure that the history of Greek communism is very important until our days, because Greek communism shaped and still is shaping the national culture, the culture and the political landscape of the country until this very, very moment that we speak.